Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to Medina Media Podcast. And with me in the studio today is Mr. Shamir Adam. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Shamir Adam.
Wa alaikum salam. I thank you guys for having me. It's very good to be in the studio today on this lovely afternoon.
Alhamdulillah, beautiful weather, I must say. For
Yes.
the benefit of our listeners out there, or rather our viewers, Mr. Shamir Adam is a master's student in community mental health sciences with a focus discipline in human rights advocacy, community intervention, and strategic leadership. He is also a Muslim activist and a participant on Medina media platforms. A very, very heavy title and discipline indeed. Can you give us an idea of what is it all about?
So basically, it's the community mental health sciences, and the focus discipline, like you said, is first of all the human rights advocacy. So this human rights advocacy is where we come in when we see or we find rather that rights are being infringed on more, especially the minority, whether it be racial, whether it be religious, etc. So we come in there and we obviously fix the situation, so to speak. We come in there and we advocacy so that we don't get a situation where people living in South Africa or even out of South Africa where their rights are being infringed or they are being discriminated against and marginalized just because of their cultural, religious or ethnic backgrounds. Number one. Number two, with regards to the community intervention, we work on programs to intervene in communities where there's problems such as crime, mental health, poverty, etc. And number three is strategic leadership, where we take the place to assist communities, to help them reach their full potential and to direct them towards better well-being.
Thank you, Mr. Shamir. This afternoon, you gave a very brilliant talk at Masjid al-Haq at the entrance of Lodium, Pretoria, Republic of South Africa. Your talk was based on chapter 16, ayah 91 of the Holy Quran, where Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and do not break your promises after making them and after having made Allah your witness. In your introduction, you have described an ideal community, but this ideal community easily disrupted by lies, corruption, breaking of promises, or pledges. Take us through an ideal community and how these can be disrupted.
So, as you know, that corruption, deception, all of these items are linked, and they are linked to promises, to pledges, to agreements. For example, a councilman or a leader takes a position, and obviously he makes agreements and he makes pledges. That's normal. He makes pledges about what he's going to deliver. Political parties, for example, they make pledges about what they're going to deliver, not only to communities, but to a country, for example, as a whole. And remember, when they go back on that agreement, or when they do not live up to that agreement, or that expectations, or what they promised, then obviously we see the problem. No service delivery, high rates of unemployment, high rates of crime, high rates of poverty, obviously all linked. So that is vital. A promise, we might, an agreement or a pledge, we might find it as something almost trivial, but it's actually not. It affects people on a large scale, and the consequences are far-reaching, as I said earlier. The consequences are much far-reaching. So it all begins with pledges and promises, right? And this obviously has nasty tentacles. It starts to put its tentacles or its hands in all sectors of the community. And obviously, it is a poison. It becomes a poison in the community. So obviously, one of the aspects we look at is an ideal community coming from promises and pledges and agreements. Towards an ideal community, a utopia, we call it a utopia, And utopia is basically a perfect community, which I don't think is possible. But also at the back of our minds, all of us as human beings, we hope that it will be possible. So there is no utopia, but obviously moving towards a utopia, an ideal society, is that one of the aspects is that we would like to, or we want people to obviously stand firm on their promises, on their pledges, on their agreements. And one of the things I said is that to not make pledges or promises you know you cannot stand on, or take a chance, or 50-50 chance, or just take a shot at maybe I will be able to fulfill these promises. Do not work on maybes. And a lot of times we have worked on maybes and we've put it across as we really can do it, and obviously we end up with big problems. Not only on the high level, community level, but also in our family and our social levels, you know, friends, colleagues, etc. So yes, keeping a promise is vital, and not keeping the promises is disastrous.
Now coming back to politicians, you have used a perfect example of how we see during campaign periods where politicians promises heaven on earth. Your practice says if he doesn't fulfill those promises within maybe a period of 4 years or 5 years, there should be some intervention that should be done from your part.
Yes.
Have we ever seen something like that taking place? Like, for instance, the president himself, somebody taking him on and say, but ABC, you promised, you did not fulfill. Do we see that taking place in South Africa?
Unfortunately, we don't see that taking place in South Africa. When you go to the parliament houses, etc., the concern is raised in debates and stuff like this. So the concern is raised, but nobody has truly gone through with it. No person, no people, no group has been so committed to go through with taking it on. For example, if the president or a statesman or a leader promises that we will have the unemployment rate, we're taking 1, 2, 3 steps. And if that doesn't materialize within the 4 years promised, or 5 years or 6 years promised, nobody actually, or no group, no party, no movement actually committed to go through and take it on and address the issue. Why wasn't this promise fulfilled? Because if they go through with it and they find out why was this promise fulfilled, you open up a huge can of worms with corruption, embezzlement, etc., etc. So unfortunately, no party or no movement or no people have gone through with it, have not been as committed to go through with it and say, we did discuss this unemployment issue a few years ago. It's supposed to be still our priority. And sometimes, as humans, they perhaps forget the priority or intentionally set it aside.
Now, do you see it as because right now in South Africa we are sitting with a huge problem of corruption, obviously, lack of service deliveries, the murder rate is like out of control. You look at hunger issue, people are going to bed on empty stomach, left, right, and center. Do you see that now as a problem of the people not taking the issues up with those that make promises, or do you see that as a problem with the leadership? How do we sort out the problem?
Yeah, you see, with regards to the human sciences, it says that if a person, if a people are being, if they run into problems, it's not always the problem of the perpetrator, but some of the blame is to be laid on the victims themselves.
I think you go with the second, that it is the victims actually
because,
that are to blame.
Yeah, there is, the problem is that with the human sciences is that they say this because, yes, the perpetrator perpetrates, but if the victims don't react correctly or don't put up a front, then they are allowing that perpetrator's hands to reach further or reach deeper. So the blame can be leveled at both. In proportion, maybe not the same proportion, but there is a percentage that both perpetrator and victim can be put to blame. Obviously, in extreme cases, it may not be that, but in general cases and in most cases, in fact, that is what it is.
It actually reminds me of not an ayat of the Holy Quran, I think it's a hadith, where it says Allah will punish both the oppressor and the oppressed. Obviously, people or the Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with them, they asked Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that how can Allah then punish the oppressed if he is oppressed? And I think the answer is given in what we have described now.
And like I said, it's extreme cases where you find that the perpetrator perpetrates and is unwilling, is unrelenting. Is unrelenting, and he keeps on perpetrating. And that's obviously the point where victims, they try their best, but sometimes they're not as lucky, so to speak, to come out of that situation. So there is extreme cases where the perpetrator is totally to blame. But like I say, in most cases, it's definitely proportioned, whatever percentage you may be, but both parties are to blame, because if you're a victim, you need to do something, you need to stand up, you need to do whatever you can do. Not everybody can do the same, but something must be done.
You are tuned to Medina Media Podcast, and with me in the studio is Shamir Adam, a master's student in community mental health sciences. In conclusion, Mr. Shamir Adam, what role can an individual play to make sure that issues of telling lies, corruption, breaking promises and pledges is minimized, leading to, as you have used the right word, to a utopia, an ideal community?
Yeah, so basically when it comes to promises and pledges and stuff like this, people need to understand that a responsibility of taking promises, it's a huge responsibility. And there are some tips they should follow with regards to promises and pledges and agreements. But it all starts from the grassroots. It all starts from the children. It all starts from your years growing up, child, teenage, adolescent, and then obviously adult. And if obviously you used to making promises and breaking them when you were younger, then it's going to be easier when you are older. But the thing is, now you are reaching far more people than you were when you were younger. Okay, so there's a few advices we can use. Is that don't make pledges and promises when you are in a very happy state, an extremely happy state. Don't make pledges and promises and agreements when you are in an extremely angry or sad state. Remember, both of these states, they cloud our judgment, they cloud our logic, they don't allow us to think of our consequences as well. So sometimes you might be able to sit back and think, hey, you know what, the consequences are severe. But in that state, we don't even think about it because your judgment is clouded. And lastly, we should not make promises about something that we don't have or something that's not within our power. Even if we perceive that it will come into our power, let's not make promises until it is within our power. So a lot of people make that mistakes that they will receive 1, 2, 3, or they'll receive certain privileges or powers so they can start making promises before they even receive it. And that leads to a disaster later on. So just 3 simple tips. We don't have to go too much into detail, but just 3 simple tips with regards to keeping pledges and promises. And I think if we follow those 3 tips, simple tips for now, we should be able to live a more enriching life, and obviously a more life on the correct path.
Mr. Shamir Adam, would like to thank you very much for coming in the studio, and definitely will engage you in some future and detailed program regarding some of the services that you offer in the community. And for the benefit of our listeners or viewers out there, Mr. Shamir Adam is available at the numbers that are going to be provided at the bottom of the screen. From my side, Yusuf Mustafa, till we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.